We're on the phone today with musician Tony Cuchetti. We're talking about his new album, Freer Street. Tony, how you doing today?
Good, Dustin. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, first of all, can you talk a bit about, Tony Cuchetti for maybe the people who haven't discovered you yet? What would you describe your sound as?
God, that's always a tough one because the way I like to listen to music is kind of all over the place, and I think that kind of spills into the when I create and write music. But I'd say I kind of am like a roots rock, Americana. I do kind of like maybe some old time country vibe, Waylon Jennings kind of sound mixed with some soul and a little bit of R&B. So I grew up with a lot of different influences and come from a big musical family. So I kind of just tell people like I'm in that bag, but kind of just decide for yourself, if that makes sense,
Excellent. And I know you've got a new album out, Freer Street. Can you tell the listeners a bit about the new album? What are we in for?
Yeah, it's a great, it's a very personal album to me. Freer Street was the street my grandfather lived on in Detroit, Michigan, where my family's from, and I put a picture of him on the album cover, and so I was kind of holding on to that at some point to use that somewhere, and this album just kind of felt that it was a good time for that, and it's just very kind of just a retrospective of things I was maybe going through over COVID and all that, and just kind of a culmination of all that together. I got a couple cover songs. Well, one of them I co-wrote with a buddy of mine, but he sadly passed a few years ago, and I kind of kept the song going, and we put that on there. And then the only other one that on there that I didn't write fully was an old Eddie Hinton tune called "Lay It On Me" that came out great, and that's an old soul song. And but other than that, yeah, it's a great album. Eric Koskinen produced it. Had some great musicians on there: J.T. Bates, Nick Salisbury, Blair Krivenik. We had Greg Inhofer put some organ on it. He was Bob Dylan's guy on Blood on the Tracks, and Abby Wolf sang some vocals on there with me, and it was just a great time. We stayed out at Drum Farm Studio in Menominee, Wisconsin, John Richardson's place out there, and we stayed out there for about 3.5 days. Just lived over there on the farm and just recorded around the clock, and it was just a really organic, great time. We were all in one room, and I cut all the vocals and everything. We were all kind of in a live setting, and so very minimal overdubs, and it was a great time and a super cool session. So I'm excited to get it out. The feedback I've gotten so far from people has been great, so I'm happy to get it out there and to the rest of the world.
Awesome. Yeah, you've got kind of like an all-star team assembled for this one, as you mentioned. And, of course, Minnesota listeners, they know Eric Koskinen. How did you guys start working together?
Well, Eric and I kind of met through the channels. Like I said, within this community, I mean, it's such a vibrant artistic community, just not even for music, but everything. But, you kind of, that just happens when you just start meeting through the channels. And a couple of my, the guys that I play with in my live band, Blair, like I mentioned, Blair Krivenik and Nick Salisbury, they play a lot in my like just kind of everyday band. And then they were mentioning Eric, like, man, you got your sound I think you guys would dig each other and stuff. You're both from, Detroit guys and stuff, Michigan guys. And, so eventually I just reached out to him one day, and I had this project coming up, and I had never met Eric before. I just, really dug his music and got into it, and super cool guy, laid back, and we got to talking, and I asked him, would you be down to produce this and maybe play on it too, and he was totally for it. We met up in his studio and one day and just kind of started hashing out, ideas and stuff, and he ended up finishing a few of the tunes with me, so as a co-writer, and it just was a great relationship, and we just went from there, and his ideas and his kind of just input just was really what I was going for on this album, and it just worked out great. So yeah, Eric, I can't say enough good things about him. He's a cool dude and great musician, great writer.
Excellent. Again, Tony Cuchetti's with us, and we're talking about his new album, Freer Street. And, as you mentioned with the recording process, I know a lot of people now can kind of record albums through email. Maybe they never even meet the rest of the band in person. But as you said, you guys kind of went back to the old days with the new album.
We did, for sure. I really wanted it to be that way. And I mean, like I said before, I come from a big musical family. My parents are both musicians, and my dad, he played a lot of sessions for the Motown during the Motown era. He's a trumpet player, and so he, growing up listening to all that and all those guys he was friends with and stuff, talking about arranging and how they recorded and all that. I really, at some point, was just told myself I want to do kind of that old school way. And when I told Eric that, he was totally on board and down for that. And we, another cool little thing that I like to talk about with this album is I purposely didn't want any of the musicians to have the music prior to the session. I wanted their first kind of raw take on the tunes. And so, obviously Eric and I had been going over them, but when we got there, nobody really knew the songs or had heard them yet. And we just started, after we set up, I just picked one out and started playing it, and the guys just jumped on it. And after a couple passes, we just hit record, and that's kind of how it went for the rest of the session. And it was so what you're hearing is pretty much their first kind of take on these tunes, and that's exactly what I wanted. And it came out, so much better than I ever could have imagined. So I'm really happy with it.
Well, Tony, as you mentioned, coming from a musical family, I read you were actually kind of part of a real life Partridge family in a way. You had the bus and everything.
Totally. My parents had the idea. They were both school teachers and taught music and other subjects as well. And like I said, they were both professional musicians. My mother being an opera singer, my dad kind of in the jazz bag and also some classical stuff with the horn. And they had an idea, after they started having kids, to start a traveling family act. And so my dad got the bus and all that, and we did it for probably about 16 years, and we were on the road 11 months out of the year. So I kind of was born into that. I have older siblings and a couple younger ones, but I was in the middle and kind of born into it, and just did that for the first probably 10, 11 years of my life. And they taught us, homeschooled us on the road, and we were doing malls and convention fairs and Vegas sometimes. It was a pretty cool way to grow up, and I have very fond memories from it, and it totally inspired what I do now. So
that is awesome. And of course, you're on the road still. I mean, you've been on it your whole life, it sounds like, and you're on the road now with the new album. And I know if the listeners want to check out your website, it looks like you're going to be all over Minnesota here for the rest of the year at least.
Yeah, I kind of have stuck around because I live south of the Twin Cities, and so I like to stay in this region because there's so much going on, and the people really appreciate music here and the art. Like I said, I tried was going to do the Nashville thing, and I just has felt like way more of a connection. And I love being in the Midwest, obviously being from the Midwest, and so I have kind of just gotten plenty of things I need to do with being just in the region between here, Wisconsin, Michigan, and stuff, but we're gonna the label and we're talking about obviously branching out for this album, so that's in the works. But we're definitely going to be doing some cool stuff around here too, and we got the big album release coming up on August 3rd, this coming week at KJ's Hideaway in St. Paul. That's going to be a really good time. I'll have most of the band that was on the album that with me that night, so it's going to be a really cool night. And and then it drops on August 4th on all the I guess into the universe, or however you want to say that. So
awesome, man. Well, again, the new album Freer Street is out now. Anything else coming up for you that we should be watching out for? I know you got a lot on your plate already, but maybe something else you want to mention before we let you go?
Yeah, I mean, not really. This has kind of been the focus, and we're gonna really be hitting this hard and touring behind it. And I'm already getting ideas ready for another one coming up. I don't know when that's going to be, but that's kind of how I work. So I got that in the works, and just some cool stuff and like that. And we'll be just playing all over. So come check it out. It's going to be a good time, and definitely check the album out. I do have to say the label pressed some vinyl, and it sounds incredible on vinyl. It's almost like this album was made for vinyl, and if you got a good turntable and maybe a set of headphones or some good speakers, I mean, I definitely recommend grabbing a vinyl copy. And you can get that either at Farm to Label Records, my record label, or at my website, TonyCuchetti.com, and I'm on all the social media stuff and all that, and all the streaming sites. So you can find me easily, and yeah, love everybody to check it out. It's a good time.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing you around here, and it's been great speaking with you, Tony. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it, and all the work you guys do. It's really incredible for artists, and so I really appreciate it, and thank you very much.
I'm glad we could help. Thank you so much, Tony.
Right on. Good talking to you.
And again, that was Tony Cuchetti, and his new album, Freer Street, is out now, and you can find more at TonyCuchetti.com.